My community is 215 years old. We have a continuous life since 1790. We're the first community of sisters in the original 13 colonies. Our life is dedicated primarily to prayer, to personal prayer, to prayer in solitude, to a reflective, deep life really in God. And it's aimed at union with God. We really live with the belief that people can grow in intimacy with God and that this has its effect in the world, that everything we do puts something onto the current of life in this world, and that prayer is effective for love and for goodness and for peace and for the spiritual development and well-being of people. Our community, from its beginnings, I believe, has been always characterized by a kind of freedom and flexibility of heart. And that has served us in very good stead as we began to look at the whole process of renewal. I also think that we have always valued education and communication with the world around us and with the culture around us, even when we lived a very different life with a very strict enclosure. Carmelite spirituality, looking back to Teresa of Avila and John of the Cross, later to Therese of Lisieux, and in our own times to someone like Edith Stein, our spirituality is one of the really vibrant prayer, contemplative, or mystical traditions in the church. And we realized that we had to attempt a contemporary interpretation of that tradition. The spirituality, first of all, in order to share it with the people, believing that people in our world were called to touch the contemplative dimension of their own lives. That, in other words, we were just not meant to be contemplatives, but people were not really whole unless they too had touched the contemplative dimension of their lives. So that was the underpinning, I think, the deep spiritual underpinning that encouraged us to do everything we did, and later to do very practical things and to plan very practically how we would move ahead. In the end, what we decided to do was to create a contemporary contemplative life here in Baltimore. This took years of planning, years of having a community meeting every week.
We held up every little piece of it and decided what was most valuable to us, most necessary, and what really was a product of times, cultures. Now, we have seen people come and people go, and I think almost every community has had that experience too, so you can become a little guarded maybe in your in beginning to relate to newer people. And so I think we have to really be very open to welcoming each new person that comes.
I think you have to be enormously creative and open. I think you really have to think about how much do you want to have a future? How much do you feel you want to carry your tradition along and pass it on to another generation? And I think that kind of desire will really generate then the ideas that you need to get, because you need to get creative ideas about how you really will bring new women into your communities and help that community to go on.
Our community learned a whole process of dreaming, of coming to terms with what we really hoped for ourselves. And we dreamt beyond the border, beyond the horizon, and then began to pull it down to what was achievable. And what, for instance, were our fears if we were to pursue this, or what were our hopes if we were to pursue these dreams. Through this process, we dealt with what were those hidden assumptions that were motivating what we did, and finally came to new goals, new objectives, and ultimately to very concrete programs or projects in which we had to decide who did the project, how was it done, what resources did we have. In other words, how would we really achieve these goals? I have come to see, and even in thinking about this interview, I realized it, how much our community values dreaming and how much we value the imagination. And I realized in thinking about it that we have really developed a habit of dreaming, so that when we begin to think about what we might do in any area, we'll often sit back and we'll say, what would it be like if? And when we say those little code words, we understand right away that we're saying, dream, push the borders. You'll dream things that in the end are impossible. But while dreaming the impossible, you will also dream the possible, but wonderful dreams that are achievable. And so that all our goal setting, even for little goals, is usually preceded by this brainstorming or dreaming. And I believe that part of where we have come can be attributed to the imaginative capacity of the community. Fortunate is the community, I believe, who has 2 or 3 or 4 really creative individuals who can dream. Everyone can dream, of course, but some people have an enormous imaginative capacity, a creative capacity. I believe that we have been able to plan concretely because we have first been able to dream. And we prioritize our dreams. We say, we prioritize them maybe sometimes over a period of 5 to 10 years. And we say, these are our dreams that we want to more systematically bring about. Having, of course, ferreted through the dreams to find out which ones can really get a consensus behind them. But that is an important part, as well as what I said before, the kind of ongoing learning, education, interest in what's happening in the world that provides new information, new images, new symbols, new possibilities. They are the stuff of new dreams. About 8 years ago, we said to ourselves, we are a strong community. We have a strong identity. We have played an important part in the renewal of contemplative life in this country. We have a good reputation in our diocese and beyond it. But we have 5 years, maybe 10, and if we do not have new members within this time frame, we will die. We won't die right away. We will go on for quite a time. But those of us who have the capability to do it will no longer be capable of training new members. that we have only a window of 5 to 10 years. And if we don't profit by this, we will fail. And we have been determined that our community will not die. We've survived for 214 years, and we're not willing to die now. We had perhaps one new sister at that point who was in her 40s. And we realized that we could not immediately bring 25-year-old women into the community and have them succeed. And so we planned that, first of all, we would take 3 or 4 40-year-olds into the community. And after we had integrated them in to some degree, we would look to take women between 35 and 40. And after that, we would plan to, and hope, to find women who were between 30 and 35. And at that point, we would be in a position to easily bring younger women into the community. And also, this would provide something that is essential to our way of life, since we remain in the same monastery for a lifetime. It would provide us with a multi-generational community, which is what we always have, but which we had almost ceased to have about 8 years ago, because we were all getting older and had just a couple of younger sisters who by this time were in their late 40s or early 50s.
Preparing the community to really accept and try to understand women, young women, and women who had had some experience of work or whatever, jobs in the world, whatever you want to say, but who were a little bit older, to create an understanding and an acceptance of how we would work with people who might join the community. I think that's very challenging, to prepare the community itself for that kind of a process.
At one point, I asked the sisters if they would divide into age groups. And so we did do that. The oldest, maybe between 75 and 90, the next age group, my age group, the younger ones. And each group was asked, this was on a community day, each group was asked to think of what they could contribute to a new person, what they had to contribute to a new person. And each group worked for quite a time, and they put their results on newsprint and came back finally to the group to say what they can contribute to new people. And it was absolutely amazing to hear, for instance, the 85 to 90-year-old people quite aware of what they had to offer to new people by way of wisdom and companionship. My age group realized that we were the ones who had to pass on the tradition. We were the ones who had to actually teach. We were the ones who had to concretely mentor them and take them through the formation process. We were perhaps the people who would have to make the most sacrifices, the most personal sacrifices. But also, what was fascinating was to see that the youngest people, and there were 2 who had not made their final vows at that point, that they realized they too had something to offer young people, new people, and that they had a responsibility to do that. I think that in that process, the community went through a profound conversion. And it set us up to do and to give what had to be done and what had to be given in order for new people to come to the monastery, even to want to come, but also to remain.
they are always, how can I, showing me sort of as beginner of religious life. They are so humble and they always try to love the younger sisters. So their affection for the younger sisters and their sincerity to live God's life.
I started beginning to picture myself in this place and thinking, this is really a call. It just was such a natural sort of, almost like movement and prayer. It was a very specific thing. And Veronica and I had, wonderful conversations as we were working outside. And she was willing to answer questions, and she was willing to talk about, for example, what she was reading. I mean, Veronica is a well-read person, and we talked about some of the literature she'd read during her religious life, and it just really inspired me to think, it's not just about this little niche of society, it's about the big picture and how you pray into this big picture, really the broadest possible horizon. And I felt very, very allured by the love that I saw the community express non-verbally to one another.
Fundamentally, my decision to come had a lot to do with witness. I wanted my life to witness to some different values in the world. I learn here why the way we live makes an effective witness.
Well, the absolute thing that drew me here was God, the absolute focus on God.
And I think that looking back, this whole process over these last 8 years, during which 6 new people came to the community, during this process, the nuns have become the very best they could possibly be. I think that everyone has gone through a transformation. And sometime back when I was giving a homily, I think, for a profession of one of the younger sisters, I said to them, to the sisters, I said, I think that you have become, at this stage of your life, the very best you could be. Well, I think because we're well known in the Archdiocese and even beyond, and we're well known because we are a contemporary Carmelite community, we have attempted to create that kind of a community. So where pastors or even apostolic sisters run into someone who is looking for that kind of a community, or for whom they feel this would be a good community for them to come to, they recommend them. We have a very wonderful, vibrant community that gathers around us on Sunday for Eucharist. And this community has been developed over quite a few years now. And their children, their young adults, their couples, their older people, but anywhere from 150 to 200 people join us every Sunday for prayer, for worship, and I think for community, because I believe that both our community and these people who gather around us really give a witness to what it can mean to live in joy and in peace and in an atmosphere of nonviolent self-giving to one another. just as several of them have also come to us from our Eucharistic community, which gathers around us. But we began having a come and see weekend once a year in which we invited women by all kinds of publicity, including our website, to come to the monastery for a long weekend and to share in the life of the community, its work, its prayer, its solitary times, its community times. And we also plan to tell them in a simple way about our spirituality, about our Carmelite tradition, going back as it does to the beginning of the 13th century on Mount Carmel. So there's a long history to excite women about. And this Come and See weekend has slowly developed. And I think we have improved it from the time we began it to the present. And now we're hoping to have at least 2 come and see times in the community a year. And are also hoping, this is a future dream for the fall, not so future as 6 years from now, but this fall, we're hoping to begin teaching college-age students, not necessarily just women and men, how to pray and how to meditate. And perhaps every couple of weeks, every month, bring them to the monastery in the evening and begin to help them to meditate. Because meditation is very important in our world of today, whether it's Zen meditation, whatever it is, Christian meditation. And we feel that we have so much to offer in this area. And now that we have these younger people who can relate to the college students and who are in their own formation process and who are learning all these things, I hope, that we feel in a position to begin to plan here in our chapel how we would go about doing this. And this is exciting.
And you know, I came on that Come and See weekend, and you know, I didn't come on that weekend and say, okay, that's it, I'm going to be a nun. But a door was opened in my heart that previously had been closed.
But I remember coming into the chapel and knowing that this would be my place.
I was brought to this group, a Sister of St. Joseph gave me their name, Sister Kathleen Durkin, Sister of St. Joseph of Wheeling, and that's how I came to know them. And I liked their expression, the contemporary expression.
I think that many communities have not yet calculated the cost of new membership. It's my belief that the time of renewal after Vatican II is over. It is completed, and we are in a new era and a new time of renewal. And this time of renewal calls for different gifts and different sacrifices even than the previous epoch following Vatican II called for. After Vatican II, we moved into a very vigorous time. And it was a time of the development of our sisters. There was a concentration on self-development, on education, even in a certain way on self-realization, which was prevalent in the whole society. And religious life needed this. There needed to be a shift to a person-centered kind of life, away from something that was strictly structure-centered. And that whole time of renewal called for new things at that time. And life has developed out of what we did at that time. And things have developed like living in apartments, one sister living alone, two sisters living together, three living together. and many other things, the possibility of vacations for sisters, various freedoms, very licit freedoms is what I want to accent. They were good things that were necessary. I think this time we are in now is calling for different gifts. And it's my belief that we have to come to terms with this new time and with what it's of us. Because if we are to have new people in our community, it will demand of us real self-sacrifice.
You know, you really have to think in very large terms, because things like feasibility and money and all will catch up with you soon enough. But, you know, you have to like inject a magic into what you hope for. And, you know, I think religious women have to do that to continue their traditions. And the people who can do that, I think, will go on. I really do.
Women coming to religious life today want, above all, communities of prayer who are truly communities. They are, by and large, talented, educated women who have had a career before they come to us. They can live a ministerial life without entering a community. They can even serve the poor. They can work in they can be in social work. They can be a lawyer who's looking out for the immigrant and the oppressed. They can do all these things as laywomen. There has to be a reason to enter religious life. And one of those reasons I have discovered is community. And I think that all our community of religious women, religious men as well actually, are going to have to provide a very deep community life for sisters. And the crux of this is that this is going to call for sacrifices, and sacrificing things that we may legitimately have, not things that were wrong for us to have, things that we may legitimately have. And yet we are going to have to be on call to mentor these women, to provide a model for them of how the life needs to be lived. And unless communities can offer this, they are not going to have and keep new women.
The community life. Yeah, our community life is so inspiring to me. Sisters, I'm so proud of my senior sisters. They are always, showing me sort of as beginner of religious life. They are so humble and they always try to love the younger sisters.
From seeing the kind of trusting relationship they have developed with each other over the years, which is really truly extraordinary, that a group of 12 women, if I think about the chapter sisters, now 14 women, have been able to create this sort of peaceful, trusting environment among themselves, which is really a microcosm of a just society. That's really something. That's something that isn't easy to do in the world. And I think if we could do this here, it radiates out to the world.
And a lot of times I think people are willing to come on board if they feel welcome.
I think, we're a community of friends and who share a deep and abiding trust in contemplation as a key to the transformation of humanity.
I think it's the feeling that we're all in this together, that this is a lifetime adventure.
And from what I can see, I'm still obviously very new in this life, but I think that all the sisters have really given themselves over, not how to say this in English, they have given themselves to the process, over to the process of formation. And each and every sister on their own level, I mean, be it our formators or be it just the sisters you happen to work with in the kitchen, they have been very accepting and very supportive of the new people, and they have very much believed in this life.
I think it's very difficult when a community like ours, which remains together for a lifetime, I think it's very difficult for them to integrate new women into the community. There's not a lack of willingness, but often there's a lack of awareness of how hard it is to break into a group that has lived together for 25 years, 30 years, 40 years, some of us even 50 years. And there is so much give that has to happen if newer people are to find their place. And I think that the community became willing to give whatever it took in order to provide new spaces for younger women. Now, it's one thing to think you're going to do this and to want to do this, and it's quite another thing to do it. And I believe that this has been costly for the community, because people who have been in the community 30, 40, 50 years, and especially in a contemplative community, can think about times of prolonged solitude. They can think of times of relative peace. When you bring 6 new women into the community, things change very much. The community is much more boisterous. The community is, for a time at least, much less solitary. These newer women have emotional needs and even immaturities that the older sisters really don't have in the same way. There are kinds of self-concern that occupy people who are coming initially to the community. So there's an enormous amount of personal investment that has to be provided in order for these people to succeed, to feel they belong, to feel that they have their place, to feel that they have their jobs. Older women have to be willing to step aside from some occupations in the community in order to let newer ones learn. They have to be willing to mentor these younger women who are going to take over their positions.
The older sisters have really done their part. And sometimes I think it must have been really hard for them to welcome us the way they did and see that we do things differently.
And what is remarkable is that everybody has done this. This isn't always the usual thing that you find for people to be willing to stand back and to mentor younger women into places in the community. So I feel very proud of what our sisters have really been able to do. And I think it speaks really of the depth of their own inner life, that in the end, they have known what was really important. And they want people to live this life in the church and in the world. And the contemplative life, they know, and we know, all of us, is very, very important for the church and for the world.